All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, I'm going to do a couple of things. I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. I want to go through our monthly operational update and talk about everything the Bitcoin miners did in the month of March. But I also want to go through the Bitcoin chart right now. I want to take a look at what's been going on with Bitcoin. We are now about 1.5 days away from the halving. The price action on Bitcoin has not been great over the last month and a half, so I know a lot of people are concerned. So I want to take a look at that as well and see what I think we might be able to expect over the coming months and what I'm looking for. We will have chapters listed down below if you want to jump around, but I recommend watching the whole thing. Just quickly before I get started, if you could do us a giant favor and smash the like button. We're going for 800 likes on this video. Also, if you're interested in this content, we follow Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners all the time. So particularly going into the halving and beyond here, I think we have a lot of very big times ahead. So consider subscribing to the channel. All right, let's talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. Okay, basically all the Bitcoin miners have provided their monthly operational report for the month of March. So if you're new to this space, the Bitcoin miners provide an operational report every single month. So it allows us to analyze these a little bit more in real time. After this, I am going to do a lot of detailed analysis on the Bitcoin chart itself. So stay tuned for that as well. Okay, so in March, just looking at straight up production. So this is the amount of self-mined Bitcoin by company. Now remember, a lot of these companies have hosting facilities as well. Those numbers are not included. This is their self-mined Bitcoin. This is their revenue from Bitcoin. So you'll see for the second month in a row, Core Scientific finished in first place. This was very, very close again. Marathon had a 9 or 10 month streak of finishing in first place as far as most Bitcoin mined in the month. But now this is 2 months in a row where Core Scientific has finished ahead of them. Marathon has an awful lot of exahash offline right now. So this was the third month in a row that they've had a bit of a tough month, still leaving them just 12 Bitcoin out of first place. So you've got Marathon in second at 894, and then you've got CleanSpark in third at 806. CleanSpark had a huge growth in the number of Bitcoin that they mined. They had a huge growth in the amount of exahash over the last few months as well. So you can now see 3 companies breaking away. This chart makes it more crystal clear than anything. Right now, Core Scientific, Marathon, and CleanSpark have broken away from the pack. I do expect a few of these companies to start catching up. There are several other companies with very big growth plans. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So after these 3, we have a huge drop off from over 800 to 425. That is Riot blockchain. Riot still basically continues. You're going to see later in their efficiency, they still struggle as far as Bitcoin mined per exahash. But even with that said, they were in 4th place overall. Then you've got TeraWolf in 5th place with 379 Bitcoin mined. Iris Energy in 6th place with 353 Bitcoin mined. Cypher 316, BitDeer 294, Bitfarms 286. And then you drop off to Hut at 231 and Hive at 224. So in 10th and 11th, there's a little bit of a drop-off. Those 2 companies, I do think we need to see what is going to come next for those companies. I expect them to probably stay in 10th and 11th place for most of the year this year, but that remains to be seen, right? We could get announcements from these companies. They have both talked about some growth plans, but most of the companies ahead of them are a little bit further along, and some of them have significant growth plans. Okay, so quickly looking at Bitcoin mined year to date. So basically, this is through the first quarter of the year. Again, we've got Core Scientific in first place, but just by 15 Bitcoin. So almost a virtual tie between Core Scientific and Marathon. The only other company over 2,000 is CleanSpark at 2,031. So again, on this chart, you can see these 3 are breaking away. Riot in 4th place. So this list is very similar, but what you'll note is from 5th place all the way down to 10th place. So that's 6 companies. There's very few Bitcoin that differentiate these 6 companies at this point through the year. So a lot of this is going to have to do with execution throughout the rest of the year to see where these companies finish. Some of these companies, I think, are going to jump way up the list throughout the year. So this is a dynamic list. This is going to change. This is by no means static. So this is one of the things we'll have our eye on for the rest of the year. And the other thing worth noting is a lot of these numbers are going to go down in the short term. We're now about a day and a half away from the halving, so the Bitcoin reward is going to get cut in half. So in the very, very short term, that is going to reduce the amount of Bitcoin that these companies mine. Now, some of these Bitcoin miners have growth plans that well exceed doubling their business model in the year 2024. So that would more than make up for the halving. So that's another thing I'm going to be looking for in 2024. Can these companies by the end of the year get back to mining more than they were at this point just pre-halving? I think there's several companies that stand a real chance of that. In fact, I think there's a few companies where it's highly likely. So obviously then if the price of Bitcoin Bitcoin continues to go up, that would bode very well for these companies. Okay, this is exahash as of March 31st. So I will tell you, this is the amount of exahash that's energized for each of these companies. A lot of these companies had some curtailment in the month of March, and then Marathon in specific had some problems. They had the better part of 10 exahash offline for most of the month. Although they have 27.8 exahash, they were operating more at 17 or 18 exahash throughout this month. This is the third month in a row this has happened to them. At some point, I do expect them to get back to business as usual and continue to grow from there. But in the meantime, that's why you'll see, even though they have significantly more exahash than Core Scientific, they were in a virtual tie for the number of Bitcoin mined. CleanSpark is now at 16.4 exahash as of March 31st. Subsequent to that, they've now announced they're over 17 exahash. CleanSpark is one of 3 or 4 companies that has very big growth plans. They are out ahead of most of the others. They've already increased their exahash by 70% year to date in basically the first 3.5 months of the year. You're going to see that show up in their hodl position. This has allowed them to add a lot of Bitcoin to their balance sheet. We'll get to that chart in a minute. Riot is still at 12.4 exahash. So they have been stuck at 12.4 exahash for a significant period of time. But I will tell you, they have announced that they expect to be at over 21 exahash by the end of the second quarter. Well, we are in the second quarter right now. So basically, over the next 70 to 75 days, if Riot stays on plan, they're going to jump from 12.4 exahash, which they've been stuck at for a long time, to over 21 exahash. A part of this is Riot's been doing a lot of infrastructure, so they haven't really been adding machines, but they are building out a 1 gigawatt facility in Texas. That will be the largest Bitcoin mining facility. So they're getting ready to start bringing that online imminently here. So I would expect to see each month between now and then Riot continue to grow in exahash, and let's see if they can hit that target of over 21 by June 30th. TeraWulf and Iris are tied at 8 exahash. Cypher is right behind them at 7.6 exahash. BitDeer at 6.7. Bitfarms at 6.5 exahash. Iris at 8 exahash has secured Bitcoin miners to get themselves to 20 exahash by December 31st. So this is another company that has big growth plans. And Bitfarms down here at 6.5 exahash as of March 31st, they also have secured Bitcoin miners to get themselves over 20 exahash by December 31st, 2024. They've also talked about getting to 12 exahash by the end of this quarter. So that's almost a double from where they are right here in the next 75 days. So you can see this chart is another one that's very dynamic. There are 6 companies that plan to get themselves over 20 exahash by the end of the year 2024. So you can see as of right now, there's only 1 company over 20 exahash. So there's a massive amount of growth coming from a lot of these Bitcoin miners, or at least they anticipate that. So that's going to be a big factor the rest of the year that I'll have my eye on. How do these companies execute on their growth plans, right? They've spent the money that most of them have raised the money, they've purchase ordered their machines, so now it's a matter of execution, getting them up and energized and running and mining Bitcoin. Okay, this is efficiency. So essentially, this is the number of Bitcoin mined per exahash in the course of the month. And I will tell you, last month I changed my methodology on this. Instead of taking the number that the company provided as their average operational, that number discounts any curtailment or any machines that might be offline because they're down or broken. I've taken the total amount of exahash. I think that's a more fair way to do this, in my opinion. So you can drop out in the comments if you agree or disagree. I think the other way skews the numbers, particularly when you look at Marathon, which is in last place at 32 Bitcoin per exahash. That's 32 Bitcoin per exahash using the 27.8 exahash that they have and that they bought and paid for and should be running. If we did it the other way, they're saying they ran at about 17.5 exahash over the course of the month, so they would look a lot more efficient. So you guys let me know which number you think is more important. Hive and CleanSpark at the top of this list, but these are starting to get very close. So most of these Bitcoin miners have been focusing on efficiency. There's 2 different types of efficiency. This is the number of Bitcoin mined per exahash. So that's how efficient they are at keeping, as close as they can to 100% operational. The other efficiency is basically measured in joules per terahash. How efficient is their fleet? That affects how much the price of their Bitcoin is. So I suspect they're going to shift from focusing on the quantity of Bitcoin they can mine to really managing their costs more over time. So we're going to see what happens to these numbers. We'll have to wait and see. Post-halving, I do think there will be some changes on this chart. Okay, then if we get to the Bitcoin hodl, these are the Bitcoin miners that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. You're going to see there's 4 of these companies that are way out in front, 1 that's way out in front. Marathon now has over 17,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's very close to double HUT, which is in second place. So Marathon is really pulling away. HUT has managed to maintain over 9,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They've been hovering around that for over the last year. They've had a hard time adding to that, but by the same token, they have managed to hold on to it, still leaving them in second place. But you're going to see Riot's getting very close to them now. I would expect, it's my estimation, that Riot will probably pass HUT at some point and go into second place. Having said that, I will say that April is the last month where these miners are going to be able to add a lot of Bitcoin to their balance sheet from a hodl position. After the halving, this is going to get very difficult, particularly in the first 3 to 6 months after the halving. As these companies ramp back up and add significant exahash, they may be able to add more Bitcoin later in the year. CleanSpark's in fourth place. They're now over 5,000 Bitcoin. These four companies you can see have pulled away from the pack. It's worth noting over the last 6 or 7 months, CleanSpark has gone from 500 to 5,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So they've made a concerted effort to get that hodl position up. Hive in fifth place. They are still hodling. Cypher in sixth place. They are still hodling. And then you'll see there's a giant drop off from there. Nobody else is even over 1,000. And there's really only 9 Bitcoin mining publicly traded companies that are hodling at all. The rest are at or near zero or not even reporting the number. It's so small. So lastly, if we take a look at just the month of March, these are the only companies that hodled Bitcoin in the month of March. Again, out of the publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies. So you're going to see CleanSpark in first place. They hodled over 800 Bitcoin in the month of March. Marathon 451, Riot 423, Cypher 308, BitDigital 217, and Hive Blockchain 156. So there's only 6 companies right now that are hodling Bitcoin. All the other Bitcoin miners are selling their Bitcoin. Of course, again, this is out of the publicly traded Bitcoin miners that we follow. Okay, that's it for the month of March. Let's take a quick look at the Bitcoin chart itself. I just want to point out a few things because we have been struggling, and I know a lot of people are getting nervous. You're going to see we had a big breakout back on February 28th. That was a part of a big run up to over $60,000. From that massive run up, we've been fluctuating. We did have another big move to the upside. We did break our previous all-time high from the previous bull market at 69,000. We got up to 73,800, this purple line right here, so not quite 74,000. But really, over this period of time, we've been bouncing up and down inside of this range. A couple of things I want to point out. Yesterday, which was Wednesday, we did close the daily candle below this red line right here. This red line's at just under $62,000. This line was formed on March 2nd. It has held every day since then. You can see in the middle of March, on March 19th, we really tested this line, but closed the daily candle right at it. We've candle wicked below it several times, but yesterday we broke below it. So we're going to have to see if that's just a one-day fake out. So oftentimes, as I like to talk about, I look for confirmation. Closing below a line of support or above a line of support for just one day, to me, does not necessarily confirm a move in any particular direction. So I will be looking to see what happens today and tomorrow, really in particular. Are we going to jump back above this line and hold? I will tell you, I do think there's a very reasonable possibility. You're going to see a gold box down here. This box starts at just over $59,000. So that would be a full 20% pullback from the peak that we had. And that peak was on March 13th at just under $74,000. And the bottom of this gold box is just over $55,000. That would be a full 25% pullback. So I do think that it is possible. This is what has been typical over the last basically 17 or 18 months for Bitcoin, a 20 to 25% pullback inside of this gigantic bull market where Bitcoin has essentially more than tripled in a 17-month period. We've had 4 separate occasions where we've had a 20 to 25% pullback. So we haven't quite gotten to that at this point. So, we did get to 19%, and maybe that's where we'll end. But I just want to show this chart and leave on the table. I do think it would be pretty normal to pull back and maybe spend a brief period of time inside of this box. So I do think this would be critical support. I don't know that we'll ever even actually get to this, but one of the things that's leading me to believe we may very well do that, if we look at the daily RSI, you're going to see there's a descending line of resistance. We keep hitting lower lows on the daily RSI. We had a strong line of support dating back to January of 2024 at around 48 on the daily RSI. You can see about a week ago, we broke out underneath that, and we kind of retested this a few days later, and it looks like it's turned into resistance and we're heading lower. So it looks like we may be set for some type of reset on the daily RSI. We are most of the way through this, but you can see we are not near oversold. 30 is considered oversold, so that would allow room potentially for Bitcoin to have that full, 20 or 22% pullback. And the other thing that I would be looking for is I think we need to break out of this descending line of resistance before we really have the next leg up in Bitcoin. I do think obviously we're just going into the halving over the next 1 or 2 days. And so I do think a lot of the bull run is left ahead of us. I am still very bullish on Bitcoin personally. Again, that is not financial advice. That is just my opinion. But in the short term, I would say I do think we need to break above this line in order to have the next leg up in Bitcoin. In the meantime, I think right now in the short term, the pressure is downward. Having said that, we've been going sideways for the better part of 2 months. So we have been trading in a range. So I'm not expecting gigantic moves, but that's just my personal opinion. I'm showing you what I'm looking at here. So these are a few things maybe to keep our eyes on to give us a hint as to whether the next move in the very short term is to the downside. Are we going to finish out this 20% pullback in Bitcoin, or going into the halving, are we maybe going to turn around and start to rally again? So obviously we don't know the answer to that in the short term. So that's my quick look at the Bitcoin chart itself. So that's what's going on with the Bitcoin miners. That's what's going on with Bitcoin. Again, sometime tomorrow night is going to be the halving. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and smash the like button. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next video.